Welcome everyone back to the 39 Gen podcast from Yosan University. I have a really awesome guest with me today. Now, can you tell people who you are and a little bit about what you do?
So, what I used to say for my goodness, a long time is I do Chinese. So, in fact, I specialized in classical Chinese. So the classical text of Chinese and mainly of the around the common era, some centuries before common era or just after, and on both sides, on what is called philosophy or thinkers or Chinese classical thought, and the classical text of medicine. The best example of that being the text as those found in the inner classic of the Yellow Emperor, or text as the treatise of the cold disease, this kind of text.
That's amazing.
And what I try to do is to understand as far as it is possible for us today, of course, to understand the way to approach the human life and the meaning of the human life and the balance. What it is to be in good health, to nourish life, and also the unbalance, what it is to be out of balance, to have a disease, to go against some of the order of life. And trying to understand how they approach that from the classical text of thinking to the medicine and so on. And in medicine also, the way to do a diagnosis. And when we have done the diagnosis, of course, normally you have the treatment to apply, that you learn how to restore the balance. The main thing, the most important thing is to find where is the unbalance in the system that you applied, of course. And there is, even in the classical approach of medicine, several possible systems to analyze the situation, to find the unbalance, and that leads to a treatment. I try to do that without using Western medicine. Of course, I know that I have Western medicine in my mind and that I will not unlearn it totally or completely, whatever. And there is nothing against the Western medicine. It's just trying to restore or to present to people who are interested to that another way to approach the balance. And we don't need, in this case, the physiology, the anatomy, and the nosology of the Western medicine, even if we are in a surrounding full of that, of course, and it is somewhere in our mind also, but to try to understand this other way to approach what is the meaning of what is used constantly as qi, yin yang, the 5 elements or agents or phases of whatever, or heaven and earth, all these great concepts, which look a little bit as abstraction or something besides that you learn when you start, because they are so poetic, and that you forget when you are in the reality of the medicine. In fact, to show that it is the reality of life expressed in other words. And to do that, it is necessary to know not only the medical text, but also all these other texts around, because it is also in this text that we find the meaning of this basic fundamental concept to define life. And it's not to put that or to say, forget about anything. Chinese medicine has to be the pure approach of the classic. It is not possible. So, we will never be again in the mind of a Chinese doctor of centuries ago or whatever. And second, we are not in the same world. So it's not possible. So, full stop. And but if we understand this approach, we understand what is behind, really at the core of all these texts, of this medicine, and that can benefit to the global approach of medicine, human medicine. You may give something to contribute to the building of the human medicine for tomorrow, So, which is in fact what I wish. And, uh, and everything is possible, biomedicine, Western medicine, with some ideas coming from the classics of China, whatever. Everything is possible. Everything may be very interesting and fruitful. We just have to give the right the right name to what we are doing. That's all.
Totally.
Uh, yeah, it's what I try to do for a long, long time. I started with Father Claude Lore, a Jesuit father specialized in ancient Chinese thought and especially the early Taoism, and Dr. Jean Schatz, who was a MD and also an acupuncturist, and we start to work together, I think, in 1970, 71. So a
Wow.
long time ago, more than 50 years ago. And they died, one in the 80s, beginning of the 80s, and the other in the beginning of, in 2001. So, but there is people who try to continue this kind of approach. And when I say approach, as I tell you, there is several possible approaches, even in the classical Chinese medicine. And I mentioned the yin yang 5 elements, but it is not the only one, which is also interesting to learn from the Chinese studies, is that they are not exclusive. If you take an approach, it doesn't exclude the other.
That's awesome. Well, you've spent decades working with classical texts. What drew you so deeply to this world of thought? What pulled you down this path? And what keeps you engaged with it today?
Yeah. I think that at the beginning, what I was looking for when I was 20, my 20s, was, as everyone of this age or teenager and so on, I was looking for a meaning for life. So
Yeah.
is life meaningless, or do we have something? Is there something in this universe? So, and whatever are the name, because the human language cannot name it, in fact. So, and sure. And when I met Father Claude Lard in 1969, and he spoke about the Chinese classical approach, and especially through the text that he was studying and translating at that time, the Huangdi and the Tao Te Ching, so the Book of the Way and the Virtue. So, when I heard him speaking, I felt that there were something in in this approach, and which was, how do you say it, speaking to me. They were, yes, because I think it was practical. It was in action. There is no wisdom if there is no wise people to put in action the, the, the wisdom. So so it's sure, and we are very close, but in a different approach. Of, for instance, when we find in some part of the Bible or Gospel, or in some part of other spiritual approach, just which is completely normal because we are all human beings. So, and mostly in the same circumstances of life. So even if there is differences, so the approaches are all different, and we cannot make any amalgam. It's absolutely no way to say it is the same that this or that. It is never the same by definition. But there is, yes, what we are living is the same thing. And there is something in the different approach where you feel that we are really the same human being living the same reality. So, and sure, and my approach doesn't exclude your approach, but I don't try to say that it is the same or it will finally be the same because I don't know and I have no way to know. But so that I was moved by this way to approach. And so in practice, for instance, in the French university, I had several degrees in the classics, humanities, like French literature, Greek, Latin, and so on. Also and also in philosophy. And my professor wanted me to continue, for instance, to go the highest degree of diploma in philosophy, so, and I told them, yes, okay, I will do that if you say that it is that it's the word escaped me. I will do that only if it is um, mandatory. If it is mandatory to do in the same time, for instance, kind of apprenticeship in whatever you do with your hand. You know, is wood carving or electricity or whatever. So as long as there is nothing like that, I refuse to continue my study in philosophy. So, because it will be that, what? Just to teach philosophy to the next generation? No, it was not enough. And what I love in the Chinese approach, is the best, of course, of the Chinese approach, is that, as I tell you, there is always the action, the putting in action. If you have understood something through the study, you have to live with, and to put it in action. If not, either what you have understood and what you now know has no value.
Yeah.
And so for what do you continue? So, or there is a value. The ultimate value is life,
Yeah.
and the ultimate things that you are in your personal life, social life, or medicine is to nourish life. So
Yeah.
how do we do that at the best? And you cannot do that because you are only in your books. I'm a scholar, but I always have this kind of feeling you have to do things. And so when we met Dr. Jean Schatz around the same time, in 1970, I have this kind of intuition, if you like, that the Chinese medicine was for me a way to have a kind of bridge to reestablish a continuity between the thought and the action, between what I think, what I learn, and what I do, and so making a kind of or looking for a kind of oneness in life, and that, of course, makes sense. So
Yeah.
I have a kind of intuition, certainly not in these words. And so it was enough for me to start to study Chinese medicine, classical Chinese, with Father Lar and Dr. Jean Schatz. I was very, very lucky to learn with them, of course,
That's amazing.
plus at French University, of course, also, and in Taiwan, when I stay for 1 year for the spoken language. I forget a lot. So, and, sure, and it is, and little by little, it was possible to continue because there were nothing which destroy really this, in me, this possibility, this vision of a kind of continuity, a possible continuity between what you learn, what you read, and what you do, and giving a kind of meaning to the life, to our life, in the bosom of the universe, even the order, for instance, the laws of nature, or the natural order of life that we saw in the cosmos, as in the human body or everywhere. All of that, little by little, year after year, built this kind of feeling that, yes, we are and we are as a human being, one of this myriad of thing or being that people the universe, and in the same time by our heart, what the Chinese call the heart, by what we have inside of us and which is unique, at least in the world as we know it, on earth, so that we may be the beating heart of the universe also, and we can see the beauty of the universe.
Mhm.
So what is the beauty for if there is nobody to see it? And so perhaps to have a kind of relationship, a kind with this power, this potency, which displays itself through this beauty. Of course, always mutilated, and maimed, destroyed, mainly by the human being who are unable to go to the end of their own heart and to join with the source of life.
Mhm.
And when we practice medicine, if we do not place ourselves in this perspective, we cannot be in a human medicine by human for human being. There is something which is lacking that all
Mm.
the techniques and knowledge cannot compensate. So it is also useful for the practitioner.
I love that. It
Thank
sounds,
you.
it's so beautiful. We at different universities often emphasize, especially at Yosan, we emphasize the lineage, but there's also the innovation that comes with the modern technology and this path of synthesis in ways.
Mhm.
How do you see the classical text
Mm.
is
Yeah.
informing modern clinical practice? How do they work together?
I think, as I tell you, there is several possibilities and several levels. So
Mm.
you can just be in Western medicine with some kind of ideas or inspiration coming from classical Chinese text, or you may try to mix this Western approach and some kind of thing that you say it is the same. What is called, for instance, the liver or the spleen in the classical text. There is several approach. Either you say this is a function that we know in Western medicine as this or that. For instance, it's one example. You may say or not that the spleen is a pancreas function or whatever. You may say a lot of things. Why not? If it
Mhm.
is an approach working and making sense with a kind of consistency, coherence, and with a way to put a diagnosis and to apply a treatment, and the treatment is successful enough,
Yeah.
why not? So,
Right.
sure. And so there is a lot of possibilities, but so what I told you is it's important is to give the right name
Mm.
of what we are doing and not to say that you are the unique way, the unique one. So that there is enough place for the other. So, and what I think, which is the most important, is just not to reduce the Chinese classical approach to what we know through the Western medicine.
Yeah.
Because the Western medicine is doing Western medicine better than Chinese medicine. So for what, we take some ideas. Oh yes, this plant, this ingredient, this plant is interesting. I may try that in my laboratories. Okay, why not? Sure, fine. But so it's what I think is most important things is first, as a practitioner, to choose what is the tool which is the most convenient for me.
Yeah.
For some people, so it is a very classical approach. Working a lot with the pulses and so on. For other, it is just to look at the result in laboratories and to try to find some kind of link with what we know in Chinese and so on, so whatever. So, and, but it has to fit with your own life. You
Yeah.
know? So, as a painter, for instance, you have great painters. You may have, for instance, Picasso or Rembrandt or Rubens or whatever. But they certainly they did not have the same brush.
Yeah.
And okay, perhaps Picasso may do a painting with the brush of Rembrandt, but certainly not as well as with his own brushes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, and sure, but what is the best brushes? Is the one that fits to my hand. And it
Yes.
fits to my hand because I am a practitioner with all my being. So, uh, I'm not only when I enter the treatment room, even if entering the treatment room is a kind of moment of gathering, focusing, and emptying, and so on. So, but we can do that in a relationship with what we do daily, everywhere. So, sure. And what I think also, as I tell you, is the most important thing is to find the root of what we have to understand. So to go to the root, whatever is this root, and a root has to be deep enough and old enough. Yeah. And I cannot do, for instance, classical Chinese medicine if I don't go in a deep understanding of the classic of Chinese medicine. So, is it important to learn classical Chinese? Not necessary if you have somebody able to explain the main concept because they spend years and years in this text. So, sure, to understand, to feel what it is. It is a qi, and you may understand Chinese classical medicine better by, for instance, doing calligraphy than by studying a text. Depends of you also. Yeah. So, sure, it is important to have roots, and roots solid enough to explain or to present an approach, a complete approach of life. Yeah. So sometimes people they ask the question: does the Chinese medicine treat this or that? I say, if it is a medicine, by definition, it is able to treat everything.
Yeah.
Bon, some disease better than other one, but it is the same in any medicine, including the modern Western medicine. So better in some fields than in other. Yeah, sure. But you do not ask this question for the Western medicine. Does the Western medicine treat that? The answer is, of course, we have a treatment, and if we do not have one, just wait. You know? And in the Chinese approach, of course, we can treat everything. Sure, by definition, if it is a medicine. What does it take to be a medicine? It takes to have roots, to have a very rooted, anchored approach of life. And the approach of life has to be both in a human being and in the universe. So everywhere. And certainly, and in the Chinese approach, that is very important because it makes the analogy working also with other conditions. Sure. And and to build a kind of corpus, text, knowledge, so consistent with this approach to identify the natural forces or the qi or the functioning and so on, their relationship, their movement, and always in the Chinese approach to have that in motion, in movement, in relationship, in evolving. So, but to have a corpus of text and a corpus of text approaching this movement of life, for instance, for the medicine inside the human life, well enough, good enough to make a diagnosis. So, able to make a diagnosis and to have specific tools of treatment fitting with the diagnosis. If I do this diagnosis, as a result, I will do this or that. I will treat like that. So if we do not have this, for instance, these three prerequisites, we do not have a medicine. To have its own corpus, its own diagnosis, its own treatment, and its own researches. So, and here we are in the continuity. I have to say that nowadays, I say that more than 90% of what is called research in traditional Chinese medicine are research in Western medicine, implying some aspect of some Chinese or some aspect of Chinese medicine, but they are not really research inside the Chinese medicine as such. So, and now, why is this important? Because if a medicine, which is really a medicine, doesn't evolve, it's already dead. So, as I said often to my students, so if they say, can we do that? Or is possible to say that or have an idea? Say, okay. If you say it is my idea, it is how I see things based on this and that, do it. So, and perhaps it will be part of the traditional Chinese medicine. Just wait 2 or 3 centuries and you
Yeah.
will know. So, whatever it is. And it is very important to continue to, uh, to make this medicine evolving, but evolving from his own roots. Yeah. From the approach, the theory, the practice and science, the diagnosis, the treatment and the researches. And through all of that, these four conditions, we may have a constant evolving and enrichment of the Chinese classical medicine, which may become an aspect of medicine or part of the medicine of tomorrow, if it is possible. So, but of course, if we say, okay, the classical Chinese medicine, so all what was said before, for instance, the 17th century or the 19th century, so it's not pure enough. So you are in a museum with a mummy,
Yeah.
So
Right.
that's all.
Well, you've described a real knowledge of the Chinese vision of life, and it is that you have to be able to see things in a different system. It's not like
Yeah.
we are looking at it in its own perspective. And I experienced that living in Asia when I would go in and they would talk about, you're dealing with heat. You are, you've got too much heat going on, or you have this. There's this separate worldview that they're not comparing. And I was like, what do you mean? I remember the first time someone said, oh, you're going to get, wind right now. And I was like, well, what do you mean by that? It's like, how can you, and it existed in its own system. And it was that you have to view it through this other system. You can't sit there and go, well, what are they saying? Can you share a story where understanding this other system or a classical text or someone you taught helped see the patient differently, or help, why is that important to see things from the Chinese vision of life?
So, of course, there is nothing as a Chinese vision of life, as there is nothing as a Western vision of life.
Yeah.
We have to enter in a specific approach. So, yes, and it is the same thing in China, and especially if we take 25 centuries, yes, of history. So when we speak the Chinese approach, yes, we have to say Chinese approach as we can find them in this kind of text of this period of time. Yeah. Sure, of course. And I think it's I don't know, it's a continuity. It's certainly when you look at someone and to learn little by little that two things, that as if you are a practitioner, you are the reference.
I love that.
In a way, you are the reference. you have to be balanced or better balanced than the patient. So,
Yeah.
and, so, and so you have to be right, upright and right. So, and you are right. So, and exactly in the same time, uh, you don't know, and you are with the patient, and the patient has the right to be whoever he is. They are, whatever. You have to accept this form of life. If I am not able to accept this form of life, even with a lot of distortion sometimes and so on, how can I treat it? How do I treat the patient if I do not accept this life? Yeah? Uh, and so there is no model as such. There is a way to try to let the patient and the life in the patient to rectify itself through what I do to balance, of course, but that ultimately there is the inner transformation in the patient, which will really be the healing, which is not to feel better, but to have a transformation, conscious or not. But that in such a way that, yes, that is over. This thing is over. Doesn't mean that we are in a perfect balance, of course, never. But and life is in fact, the process of life in a human being is a constant healing in a way, so of
Right.
oneself and the other, and sure, and the same time. So there is this kind of absolute necessity to have all the knowledge that are required. When I treat someone, I have to know a lot of things. And in the same time, we need to forget all of that when we are at the moment, the final moment of the treatment. For instance, to make the diagnosis, I need a lot of knowledge to decide what big kind of remedy or point I will take. Yes, also. But there is at the moment you are doing that, you have to be totally empty of everything. And
Yeah.
so even before that, when we are making the diagnosis, we have, of course, to learn little by little to have this double approach that all my knowledge doesn't prevent me to feel what I feel and to be who I am, and so the patient to be who he is. This kind of relationships, which is, of course, at a kind of conscious level. When I act nicely and so on. I do not shout loudly with my patients. Better or whatever. Okay, sure. A lot of things, perhaps some nice soft music, whatever,
Yeah.
depends of everyone. Uh, and the attitude, even the inner attitude, I focus and so on. And always in the same time, to have this kind of empty place
Yeah.
where happen what and comes what comes, and that
Yeah.
I don't know and I cannot express, which is perhaps the root of what we call intuition or whatever. I don't want to enter in intuition. So we have to give a definition, but we know, because any practitioner has experience of that, that yes, there is things which are coming to us, which are not exactly coming from our knowledge or conscious state. But so they are at least in part depending of how I conduct my life daily.
I love that. Well, you said something earlier that I really loved, and it was that we have to be kind of a reference point. And there is this journey of, and I think this is something that Yosan really does well, where the students have to cultivate their own chi. You have to be taking Tai Chi
Mm,
classes. You have to be
yes,
meditating. You
very
have to
good.
be, yeah, you have to, because otherwise, how can you say, hey, your chi's out of balance and I'm going to help you get it back in balance? And they're like, you look awful. And you're like, I feel awful. You have to be a reference point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. For instance, if you take the pulses, of course, now we may have a watch, or we may know, if you want the speed of the pulses, I have a machine. But if I do not have a machine, I have to be the reference.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
For instance, it's that simple to start with, of course. And of course, I learn for the patient. Yes, absolutely. But I also uh, have a place first of knowledge and second of uprightness, of order. No.
Yeah, I
Mm.
love that. If you could go back in time and give yourself advice about one thing, change something that you want to study more of, what would you do?
Don't know. I just keep trying.
Yeah, I love that. Keep trying, right?
Mm.
There was one thing that I saw on your bio that I really thought was interesting. The Chuangzi and Lao Tzu have been deeply influential for you.
Mhm.
How do these Taoist classics speak to the practitioner or healer in today's fast-paced world?
Yeah, slow down.
Right?
No, it's what is whatever or whoever you are, whatever you do, if it's absolutely necessary to come back regularly to what we may call silence, what we may call ourselves, what we may call the source of life, what we may call any name, because but in the emptiness. So behind any thought or language. So at least for a short moment, of course, it's so, but little by little, if we do that every day, the way we do it, whatever, there is a multiple possibilities, it becomes some part of your reality, of your way to embrace life. So, and I think that it is the most important thing, because if we don't do that, uh, and if we so all what we do in life will not reflect the movement of life itself. So what I mean, if all what I know, I understand, and so on, accumulates, but if we do not come back to what is giving the meaning to all this knowledge, so we have in a kind of abstraction, we are in, so, and it's the same thing, for instance, that nowadays, what about the fact? Or let me so get rid of facts, of fact, because they prevent me to continue to think so nicely. So,
Yeah.
or, but because this thinking is less and less rooted, it becomes just more and more my own ideas, and I
Hmm.
defend them more and more, and they are narrower and narrower, and more absolute and rigid, because I have
Yes.
no other way to continue. So, and sure, of course, it's more complex like that, but yeah, sure, you see, and yeah, I cut myself little by little from the root of life, and so when I live in my daily life, a lot, even in the treatment, in the office, so in the clinic, a lot of things that I do are not coming from my thought, my will, and so on. So I do a lot of things like that. So but they are coming from somewhere in me. And if I do not cultivate this place from there they are coming, I cannot implement life in me, and of course, in this case, nourish it in the other. So it's what, for instance, we learn in the Qigong or Tai Chi. So from where is coming the gesture, the movement, and what gives the movement its quality.
Yeah.
So I have to repeat, of course, a lot of time or whatever, but it's not enough. Has to be done because it comes spontaneously, like that. But this spontaneity uh, is comes only through the working of the inner working, constant inner working, emptiness, how to embrace the movement of life. As long as I do not embrace enough the movement of life, what I call spontaneity is just my desire or my fantasy.